Picture this: 500 years ago, tens of thousands of soldiers march for months, and the most basic human need becomes a crisis. Because sometimes what destroys an army isn't the enemy's sword, it's disease, filth, and bad logistics. Today I'll show you how the Ottoman army handled it. Not legends, a system, discipline, and smart planning. Here's the first truth. Setting up a camp was an art, and the master of that art was the camp officer. Before the main army arrived, smaller units moved ahead, scouting the land, because choosing the wrong spot meant disaster. He looked at the big picture: water source, flat ground, safety. But the most critical question was always the same: which way is the wind blowing? Because smell and airborne risk travel with the wind. Ottomans would test it, feeling the wind direction, checking if it stays steady or shifts. Then the rule kicked in. The latrine area goes downwind. So the camp stays breathable, because if you place it upwind, the air turns heavy, morale drops, discipline weakens, and problems spread fast. Second calculation: water. Camps were often placed near a stream because water is life, but the stream's direction mattered. Drinking water upstream, latrine area downstream, because waste can seep, rain can carry it, and if you get that layout wrong, you invite illness into the camp. And that's how outbreaks begin, not in battle, but in the ground beneath your feet. Third calculation: distance. Too close and the camp suffers. Too far and safety becomes a problem at night. So they aimed for a balanced distance, close enough to be safe, far enough to protect the camp's air and order. Once the location was marked, the invisible engineers stepped in. The diggers, they started before the main Ottoman army force arrived, because everything had to be ready by sunset. And this wasn't random digging. They studied the soil, because different ground behaves differently. Sandy soil is easy but collapses. Clay fights back but holds. Rocky ground is hard, yet stable. Depth mattered. Shallow pits flood in rain, spread odor, increase risk. So they went deeper, reducing exposure, controlling smell, lowering health threats. They also planned capacity, long narrow trenches, because thousands would use the same system. Too short and it fills fast. Then the entire camp pays the price. Next problem: privacy. An open trench creates disorder and harms morale. So they built screens, thick felt and cloth, held by stakes, creating a protected area. Those screens also helped manage airflow. Simple, but effective. High-ranking officials had separate setups, not just privilege, but security and hierarchy. Then came a key detail: ground safety, because unstable edges create accidents and chaos. So they laid strong wooden planks along the sides, giving stable footing, even in wet weather. At this point, the system looked simple, but it was practical engineering, built for speed and order. But for the Ottomans, the real engineering was hygiene, water and cleaning discipline. Because water wasn't only for drinking, it was part of the health system. That's where the water carriers came in, moving water constantly between the source and the camp. They placed barrels near the latrine area, and soldiers had small personal jugs. The rule was clear: use water for cleaning, because clean hands reduce disease spread. When hands stay cleaner, food stays safer, and the whole army stays stronger. Now compare that to many European armies of the same era, where hygiene routines could be less consistent. And that inconsistency helped intestinal illnesses spread faster, sometimes before a battle even happened. But the Ottoman camp routine pushed regular washing, reinforced by daily practices and strict discipline. Still, water could become limited. Dry regions, long marches. That's when backup methods appeared. Clay could absorb grime, ash could cut grease, and in some cases lime was used as a disinfecting aid. Now the strongest tool, slaked lime, think of it as a biological defense line. Every evening, a routine. Lime was spread into the trenches in a systematic way. It helped control odor, reduced fly breeding, and lowered the risk of contamination. This wasn't only about comfort, it was about morale, because constant foul air breaks an army mentally. And lime was used consistently. If the camp was heavily used, they increased the amount. Then, when the army moved, one more rule mattered: leave no danger behind. Open pits could harm anyone passing later, and could spread illness and ruin reputation. So they covered the pits, packed clean soil on top, sometimes weighted it with stones. The army moved on, and the ground behind them looked quiet, clean, and sealed. But none of this works without discipline, because one careless act can endanger thousands of Ottoman soldiers. Going outside the designated area wasn't treated like a small mistake. It was a serious violation. Because waste near water, near food, near tents is how outbreaks start. So rules were strict, not for cruelty, but for survival. There was also inspection. Physicians and surgeons in Ottoman army checked the camp routines. Was lime applied? Was the trench filling? Were screens intact? How was the smell level? Then they watched health signals, rising stomach illness, fevers, early warning signs. If risk appeared, they responded: more lime, new trenches, closing old ones, sometimes even moving camp. Because stopping an outbreak is hard, preventing it is strategy. And there's another layer: the Menzel system, permanent stopping points on main routes. These weren't just rest stops. They had infrastructure, including more stable sanitation setups, built and maintained over time, inspected, cleaned, kept ready. So when the army reached a Menzel, they saved time, reduced workload, and kept standards consistent. That's why Ottoman logistics was a hidden power, a survival machine behind the battlefield. The lesson is simple. Logistics is life. Cleanliness is life. Discipline is life. Because an empire isn't held up only by weapons, it's held up by the systems nobody sees. Now I want to ask you, if you commanded 50,000 people on a long campaign, how would you handle the hygiene crisis? Write your answer in the comments, because sometimes the biggest war is against disease, not armies.